What if the only family you had left was the one trying to break you? Piece by fragile piece. What if your cries were swallowed by the four walls of a house that was once a home, but was now just a cage? And what if your only hope for salvation wore leather, rode a steel horse belching thunder, and had a skull stitched onto their back? The world teaches you to fear the outlaw, to cross the street when the rumble of a dozen Harleys approaches. But sometimes, the monsters you're taught to fear are the only ones willing to fight the monsters you know. This is a story about how the deepest darkness can be shattered by the most unexpected light, a light that gleams on chrome and is reflected in the hardened eyes of men who live by a code the rest of the world forgot. It begins with a tremor, not in the earth, but in the hands of an old man named Arthur, a man who had forgotten the feeling of solid ground beneath his feet. His world was a constant, dizzying descent, a perpetual fall he was forced to endure. The polished oak staircase in his own home had become an instrument of terror, each of the 14 steps a station of a private, agonizing cross. His son, Mark, a man whose heart was a shriveled, blackened thing, found a cruel sport in it. Just a little stumble, Dad, he'd sneer, his hand a firm, brutal shove on Arthur's bony back. The sickening lurch, the crack of old bones on hardwood, the laughter from the top of the stairs. That was Arthur's reality. Across the street from this quiet suburban prison was a different kind of noise. Grit and Iron Customs, a motorcycle shop that was more of a fortress for the local Hells Angels chapter, hummed with the sound of impact wrenches and loud, gruff laughter. Its proprietor, a mountain of a man named Grizz, had a view of Arthur's front porch. He'd seen the old man, the perpetual shuffle, the fresh bruises that painted his papery skin like faint, purple watercolors. He'd seen Mark, too, his expensive car, his tailored suit, the contemptuous way he'd speak to his own father. Grizz saw the flicker of the porch light one evening, a desperate, erratic signal, like Morse code tapped out by a ghost. He saw Arthur stumble out, clutching the railing, his face a mask of ancient pain. He saw him look toward the shop, a silent plea in his watery eyes, before Mark's shadow filled the doorway and pulled him back inside. Grizz wiped the grease from his hands with a red rag, his brow furrowed. He'd seen a lot of ugly things in his life, but the quiet, creeping evil from that house across the street made his stomach clench. He knew the look of a trapped animal. He'd seen it in the mirror a lifetime ago. That night, he brought it to Blade. The clubhouse air was thick with the smell of stale beer, leather, and engine oil. Blade, the chapter president, sat at the head of a scarred wooden table, his face a roadmap of hard miles and harder fights. A faded tattoo of a weeping angel peeked out from under the collar of his cut. He listened to Grizz's story, his expression unreadable, his eyes as cold and gray as a storm-tossed sea. An old man tripping is just an old man tripping, Grizz, Blade said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. When not the damn neighborhood watch, but Grizz shook his head, his massive shoulders slumping slightly. It ain't that, Blade. I saw the kid's face. The son, he enjoys it. And the old man. He looked at our shop like a man drowning looks at a life raft. The words hung in the air. Blade's jaw tightened. He ran a hand over his shaved head, the motion betraying a flicker of something deep and buried. He remembered another old man, his own father, wasting away in a state-run nursing home, the faint smell of bleach and despair clinging to him, the distant, vacant look in his eyes. Blade had been too young, too wild, too busy running with the club to notice until it was too late. The regret was a ghost that rode on his shoulder, its cold fingers forever gripping his heart. He'd failed his own blood. He wouldn't fail a stranger. He looked at Grizz, a silent order passing between them. Keep watching, he grunted. I want to know everything. A week later, the opportunity came. Mark left in his sleek sedan, tires squealing with impatience. Arthur watched from a window until the car was a distant speck. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror and resolve. Every bone ached. A painful souvenir from his last fall. He knew he might not get another chance. Summoning a strength he didn't know he possessed, he slipped out the back door, hobbling across the manicured lawn, his breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. He crossed the asphalt street, each step a monumental effort. He reached the open bay door of grit and iron, the smell of gasoline a strange, invigorating perfume. Grizz looked up from the engine he was working on, his eyes widening in surprise. Arthur leaned against the doorframe, trembling, the words catching in his throat like broken glass. He looked at the hulking, tattooed biker, a man who should have terrified him, and saw not a monster, but a possibility. "Please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You have to help me." Grizz gently guided him to a stool, offering him a bottle of water. He saw the fresh bruise blooming on the old man's temple, the raw fear in his eyes. "What is it, Pop? What's wrong?" Arthur took a shaky sip of water, his gaze darting back toward his house as if expecting Mark to materialize. He finally met Grizz's eyes, and the dam of his silence, built over years of fear, finally broke. "My son," he said, the words are raw, agonizing confession. "He pushes me down the stairs. For fun." The words landed in the greasy air of the garage with the force of a physical blow. Grizz's blood ran cold. The casual cruelty of it, the sheer sadism, was beyond comprehension. Without a word, he led Arthur through a back door and into the clubhouse. Blade was there, cleaning a pistol with methodical precision. He looked up as they entered, his gaze immediately locking onto Arthur's terrified face. Grizz stood beside the old man, a protective hand on his shoulder. "Blade," he said, his voice tight with fury. "You need to hear this." Arthur, emboldened by Grizz's presence, repeated his story. He spoke of the isolation, the constant threats, the way Mark controlled his finances, waiting for him to die so he could inherit the house. He spoke of the falls, the casual shoves that sent him tumbling into darkness, followed always by that chilling, triumphant laughter. The clubhouse, usually a cacophony of rough voices and roaring music, was utterly silent. The only sound was the old man's trembling voice and the soft click of the pistol as Blade reassembled it. When Arthur finished, Blade placed the weapon on the table with quiet finality. He rose from his chair and walked over to the old man. He was an intimidating figure, his leather vest adorned with patches that spoke of a violent life. But when he looked at Arthur, his eyes held a strange, fierce tenderness. The ghost on his shoulder whispered warnings of past failures. "This time will be different." "No one," Blade said, his voice a low, deadly promise, "does that to their father. Not on our watch." He turned to his brothers, who were watching with grim faces. He didn't need to give an order. He saw the same cold fire in their eyes. This was a violation of a code deeper than any law written on paper. You protect your own. You honor your elders. You crush those who prey on the weak. Blade gave Arthur a cheap, untraceable burner phone. "Keep this on you. Hidden. If he even looks at you wrong, you press one button. We'll hear it. We'll be there." Arthur clutched the phone like a holy relic, tears of gratitude and disbelief streaming down his wrinkled cheeks. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of something he thought was long dead. Hope. When he returned home, the house felt different. The air was still thick with menace, but now there was a small, defiant spark in the darkness. He hid the phone in the lining of his old armchair, his secret link to the world outside. That evening, Mark came home in a foul mood. He noticed a faint, dark smudge on the welcome mat, a greasy fingerprint of defiance. "Were you out, old man?" he demanded, his voice laced with suspicion. Arthur's heart leaped into his throat. "No, son. Just sat on the porch for some air." Mark's eyes narrowed. He grabbed Arthur's arm, his fingers digging into the thin flesh like talons. "Don't lie to me. I know you're up to something. You think you can get away from me? This is my house. You are my responsibility. You will do as I say." He shoved Arthur hard against the wall, the impact rattling the old man's teeth. "Maybe you need another lesson in gravity to remember your place." Arthur's hand instinctively went to his pocket. Then he remembered the phone was in the chair. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through him. But then he saw it, through the living room window. Across the street, a single motorcycle was parked in front of the shop, its chrome fender gleaming under the streetlight. A figure leaned against it, a silhouette of leather and muscle, watching. waiting, a silent sentinel, a promise. Mark, blinded by his own arrogance, saw nothing. He was a king in his castle, tormenting his only subject, completely unaware that an army of barbarians was gathered just beyond his moat, sharpening their swords. From their vantage point, the bikers watched the house like wolves studying a sheep pen. They mapped Mark's routines, his comings and goings, the rhythm of his cruelty. Grizz, using a pair of high-powered binoculars from the garage's loft, provided a running commentary. He just threw a plate on the floor, making the old man clean it up on his hands and knees. A low growl rumbled through the assembled men. Blade listened, his face impassive, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. This wasn't just about punishment anymore. It was about erasure. They had to remove Mark from Arthur's life so completely that not even his shadow would remain. The plan was simple, brutal, and elegant. Mark had a weekly high-stakes poker game every Friday night. He'd be gone for hours, drunk on cheap whiskey and his own ego when he returned. They would be waiting for him, not in the house, but on the road. A forced stop, a conversation in the dark, a permanent lesson in respect. "We don't kill him," Blade instructed, his voice cold. "Death is too easy. We make him understand. We take away his power, his car, his money, his confidence. We break the bully, not the man." A few of the younger members grumbled, hungry for more definitive violence, but a hard look from Blade silenced them. This was about justice, not vengeance. A few of them shared a dark chuckle. "Guess his poker face won't help him when he's explaining this to his insurance," one of them quipped, polishing a heavy chain. The mood was tense but focused. They were a finely tuned machine, each part ready to perform its function. Friday night arrived, cloaked in a cold, steady drizzle that slicked the roads and shrouded the streetlights in a hazy glow. The roar of their engines was muted, a low thrum of anticipation. They were in position, hidden in the shadows of an industrial park on the route to Mark's game. Everything was set. Then Blade's phone buzzed. It was the burner. A single, frantic press. He answered. All he could hear was a muffled sob, a crash, and then Mark's voice, venomous and loud. "You thought you could call someone? You useless old parasite. I'm not going anywhere tonight. I'm staying right here to teach you a final lesson." The line went dead. The plan was shattered. Arthur was trapped. The poker game was off. The ambush was useless. Mark was in the house, his rage boiling over, and Arthur was at his mercy. A primal fear, cold and sharp, shot through Blade. He was too late. The ghost of his father whispered in his ear, a cold accusation. "Not this time," Blade snarled to himself. He keyed his radio, his voice cutting through the static like a razor. "Plan's off. We're going in." Now the response was instantaneous. A dozen engines roared to life, not as a muted thrum, but as a deafening, apocalyptic chorus of defiance. The sound ripped through the quiet suburban night, a declaration of war. They thundered down the rain-slicked streets, a pack of steel wolves descending on their prey. Inside the house, Mark had dragged Arthur to the top of the stairs. "You love the stairs so much, old man," he hissed, his face contorted with rage. "Let's see if you can fly." Arthur squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable brutal push. But then he heard it, a low rumble that grew into a ground-shaking roar, the sound of a gathering storm. Mark heard it too, his head snapping toward the window. He saw a constellation of headlights flooding his driveway, a wave of chrome and leather crashing against his front door. He was frozen for a heartbeat, his mind unable to process the impossible scene. That heartbeat was all it took. The front door didn't just open. It exploded inward, ripped from its hinges as if by a hurricane. Blade filled the doorway, a figure of pure, undiluted fury, flanked by his brothers. The rain and wind whipped in behind them, their leather vests dripping, their eyes burning with cold fire. Mark stared, dumbfounded, his grip on his father loosening. "Who the hell are you?" he stammered. Blade didn't answer with words. He moved with a speed that was terrifying in a man his size. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his hand shooting out to grab Mark by the throat, lifting him effortlessly off his feet. The abuser, so powerful moments before, was now a dangling, sputtering child. "We're the family," he called. Blade growled, his voice a low thunder that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. He threw Mark across the room, the impact splintering a mahogany table. The other bikers flooded in, forming a silent, menacing circle around the whimpering man on the floor. There was no brawl, no chaotic fight. It was a swift, methodical, and terrifying deconstruction. They didn't beat Mark senselessly. They dismantled his world. While two of them held him down, forcing him to watch, others went through the house. They found the hidden bank statements, the legal documents Mark had forced his father to sign, the evidence of his long and patient campaign of elder abuse. Grizz, his face a mask of gentle concentration, knelt by Arthur, carefully helping the old man to his feet. "It's okay now, Pop," he said softly. "It's all over." He wrapped a heavy blanket around Arthur's trembling shoulders and guided him out of the house, away from the scene of his long imprisonment. Blade knelt in front of the blubbering Mark. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He leaned in close, his words a cold, precise whisper. "You will sign everything back over to your father. You will pack one bag. You will walk away from this town, and you will never, ever come back. If we ever see your face again, if we ever hear your name whispered in the wind, we will find you. And the lesson we teach you then will not be so gentle. Do you understand me?" Mark, his face pale with terror, could only nod, tears and snot running down his face. The king had been deposed. His castle had been breached. His power was an illusion, shattered by men who understood what real power, the power of brotherhood, truly meant. They left him there, a broken man in the ruins of his stolen kingdom. They took Arthur to the clubhouse, a place that now felt more like a sanctuary than his own home ever had. They got him medical attention for his bruises, a hot meal, and a clean bed in a spare room. For the first time in a decade, Arthur slept without fear, the comforting rumble of men talking and laughing outside his door, a lullaby of protection. In the days that followed, the Hell's Angels became his unlikely, fierce, and profoundly gentle guardians. They help him with the legal paperwork, their intimidating presence making short work of any bureaucratic red tape. They fixed the broken door, cleaned the house, and purged it of Mark's lingering presence. But Arthur found he didn't want to stay there. The house held too many ghosts. He started spending his days at the shop, sweeping floors, polishing chrome, and telling old stories to the bikers, who listened with a respect he had long been denied. He was no longer a victim. He was Pop, a cherished member of their tribe. His laughter, once a forgotten echo, now filled the garage. He had found a new family, one forged not by blood, but by a shared code of honor. This isn't just a story. It's a question. Look around you, at the quiet houses, at the lonely faces, at the people who seem to have faded into the background. How many Arthurs are out there, trapped in silent prisons, praying for a savior they don't think exists? Heroes don't always wear capes or badges. Sometimes they wear leather. Sometimes their halos are the glint of sun on a chrome handlebar. So share this story if you believe that the capacity for heroism exists in the most unexpected places. Comment with a time you saw someone stand up for a person who couldn't stand for themselves. And most importantly, be the person who notices. Be the one who listens. Be the one who isn't afraid to act. Because you might just be the unlikely angel someone is desperately praying for.